僕のロードだ Yeah まだ全然足りない新しいルールでしたい
Hello everybody! Infinite Shinjo here, and welcome back to another episode of Animated Discussions. And today, I am here to compare the anime Bakuon to K-On! This is the second time that this video is being recorded because the first time my voice got distorted because, I don't know, technical issues. So I hope it works out this time. But these two anime, I just feel are so similar that there is no way that I can't talk about how close and similar they are. So I'll run through a synopsis of both of these shows. K-On! Is probably the more widely known one. K-On! Is basically about a group of girls in high school forming a music club. And Bakuon is a group of girls that form a motorcycle club. So just from that explanation alone, you can kind of see how they're similar. But I got some similarities and differences here, so I'll go through them and then say which one I prefer, and you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. First of all, you got a main character that's a girl, very plucky, very high spirits. She gets invested in something that she wouldn't normally because of somebody else. In the case of Bakuon, you have Sakura Hane that gets invested in motorcycle clubs because of, I can't think of her name. The black hair girl there, in the blue. I can't think of her name. But in K-On!, Yui gets invested in playing musical instruments because of Mio and Ritsu. And this might be just very specific, but both of the main characters are kind of stupid. Like Sakura and Yui, if you would watch both of those shows, they're kind of dumb. They're not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. But that might just be something overall with most anime, that the main character, at least 7 times out of 10, is dumber than bricks. Or I wouldn't specifically say dumb, but at least like, not exactly too intelligent. Just one of those characters that says whatever comes to their mind, even if it doesn't make sense or it's kind of awkward to say. So in short, kind of dumb, but I don't want that to be just meant as derogatory. And the other similarity, which might be the same as the last one, both shows have a girl that's overly rich. And again, that just might be a trope that's associated with a lot of anime. But especially with these two, they have a character that's super rich. Mugi's super rich in K-On!, and I can't think of her name. The one in the back, not the one wearing the helmet, the one in the purplish hair. She's overly rich, but the strange thing is, in Bakuon, I don't really like the rich character, but I absolutely love Mugi in K-On!, which is weird because they're essentially the same character. Like, both of them are super rich, but they want to turn to a life that's something out of their comfort zone. Mugi wants to be a normal girl, and rich girl in Bakuon wants to be a delinquent, because delinquents are the only ones that ride motorcycles, obviously. And like I mentioned before, both of them are clubs in high school, which, again, that's a trope in itself. But those are some examples that I was watching and thought, okay, that's kind of weird, but it's not enough to make a video on. But this last part, both of the groups add another member to their group later on in the show. Azusa gets included in the K-On! Group, and a prodigy in motorcycle racing gets included in Bakuon. Honestly, it's kind of telling that I can't remember many of the characters from Bakuon except for Sakura. But that's just wild that, okay, plucky main character, main girl's kind of dumb, overly rich girl, club in high school. Those are just obvious tropes, but the fact that both shows not only have those similarities, but both add another member to their club later on in the show is just mind-boggling how closely similar that is. And at that point, I'm wondering if one took inspiration from the other. I can't think of which one serialized the manga first, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't at least some form of inspiration between the two. But for the differences, the first one that I came up with is Bakuon has a larger cast. Just seeing from these two posters here, there are the same number of characters in both of them, but Bakuon doesn't have the extra member that they add to their group later on in the show. So it's kind of interesting that Bakuon starts with a group of 5 and adds a 6th, and K-On! Starts with a group of 4 and adds a 5th member. It's not too much of a difference, but I was kind of pulling at straws to come up with differences. And the other difference that I wrote down is Bakuon seems to know more about the topic that they're tackling than K-On! Does. Which actually makes sense, because the whole purpose of Bakuon is the joy of motorcycle racing. But K-On's more interested in the whole moe aspect of it. So it makes sense that K-On! Doesn't focus as much on the music side of it. But those are the only similarities and differences that I can come up with. If there are some other ones, I couldn't come up with them or notice them that well. Because at the same time, I could go super in depth and say that Sakura and Yui, both main characters in their respective shows, they both talk to the instrument that they use, or the motorcycle that they use. But that doesn't come up till much later in Bakuon. And at the same time, that's just a very niche and specific thing that I felt there was no need to mention it. But I'm sure there are other things that are similar and not similar with these two shows. So now it just comes down to which one I prefer. And it's probably not too surprising to find out that I prefer Bakuon. Nope. And it's probably not too surprising to find out that I prefer K-On! To Bakuon, just because K-On! Has 2 seasons to develop their cast, where Bakuon only has 1. Although at the same time, Bakuon is more informative on motorcycles than K-On! Is about guitars. Let's be fair. If you're watching an anime about girls in high school, you're not interested on whether they know much about the topic that they're discussing. You're more interested in watching the cute girls do the cute things. But at the same time, that's not to say that just because I prefer K-On! That Bakuon is bad. It's just that Bakuon has less episodes than K-On! Does. And if Bakuon would have a second season, then it might be at least comparable to K-On! But at the moment, the difference of seasons is kind of bad for Bakuon. Although, to be frank, the hipster in me kind of wants to say Bakuon as my answer, but I'm sticking with K-On! Because it's one that I was hesitant to get into at first, but then when I watched it, I really enjoyed it. But that is going to do for today's episode of Animated Discussions. If you enjoyed, hit that like button. Let me know which one of these two you prefer. And if you haven't seen Bakuon, I would recommend it. It's not as big as K-On! Is, but it's still pretty fun. Even for someone like me that doesn't know much about motorcycles, it was still a pretty good show. But if you have any other topics that I can cover on Animated Discussions, leave them down in the comment section, and I will see you in the next episode. Momentai.